Hello, folks. Welcome back to the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. This is Rusty and Heather Bryant, and we're excited to kick off 2025 with you and encourage your marriage, help healing in your marriage, just show you a story of hope and a story of redemption. And that's what this podcast is really all about. Yeah. So I feel like that we have a lot we want to say today.
A lot.
I actually was sitting in church this morning, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, this podcast might last forever. But we're not going to do that to you. We're gonna try to get right to it though, and we're just gonna jump right in. But thanks for bearing with us over the holidays. We took a couple of weeks off, and then last week we just spent some time sharing all of our resources with you. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you go back and listen to last week's episode, because it's something that you could go back and listen to throughout the year, just as a reminder of things that we have to offer marriages. All right, you ready?
Let's do this.
Let's talk about miracles.
And it's going to be a miracle if we keep this under 30 minutes.
Maybe you might be right. So miracles, we have just been thinking a lot about the miracle that God worked in our marriage 13 years ago and is still writing that miracle story, but also just how many marriages are desperate for a miracle. Yeah. And so today what we want to do is we want to talk to you guys. If you're listening to us and you're in a place where you're like, my marriage needs a miracle, this message is going to be for you. But also, I think one of the things that I've realized over the last week is that there's a lot of marriages out there that they don't even know they need a miracle, and they need a miracle, and they need to recognize it. Yeah. And so where some of this is really stemming from is that 2 years ago, we started a February prayer challenge. This story is even almost a miracle in itself, but this is crazy. So 2 years ago, we started this marriage prayer challenge. Kind of the idea was birthed from something that our church does. And so we just decided that we wanted to pray for marriages all around the world. And so 2 years ago, we said, hey, let's let people sign up and tell us how we can pray specifically for their marriage. And we were like, wouldn't it be cool if 28 people signed up?
Yeah, because the thing our church does is called P28, and you do 28 days of prayer, and you pray for 1 minute at 1 o'clock for one thing, and that's your reminder to do that. And we just wanted 28 people. I mean, wouldn't that be cool if we could have one person per day to pray for? That was the hope.
Yeah, and the way we did it, we didn't even really have a system, because we were just we just threw it out on social media. I mean, our podcast was not really old at the time. And so we threw it out on social media, and we're like, hey, can we pray for you? And all these people started chiming in, yeah, pray for me. And so we were like, wow, I mean, let's put them on a day. And so I think we just used our calendar and we put somebody's name on there. But all of a sudden, and we went all through 28, and then we had to go back and start adding, 2 people to February 1st. And so anyway, by the end, we were close to 100, but we weren't quite there. So the next year, we were like, hey, let's organize this thing. And, we almost had 100, so let's see what happens. So this was last year. So we set it up in our booking system where people could go in and they could basically sign up for a time slot. And we offered that, and by the end of February, we had prayed for, I think it was over 100, or right at 150 names.
Right.
And so the cool thing was that because we set it up into this system, we had an opportunity for people to actually share a specific. It wasn't just like,
pray for
hey,
me.
my name is John and Jane, pray for my marriage. It was, this is what's going on. Can you pray for me?
Right.
And some would give really specific things, and some would just, pretty basic. But this year, we got it set up again. And middle of last week, I put something on social media, and you emailed me, or no, not emailed. You texted me a few minutes. It was within an hour, and you said, "What did you do?" And Because it was just email after email after email after email. So within 48 hours, we were over 200 names.
Yeah.
Or 200 couples, and we had gotten to where we opened up more time slots. And I think that we've opened it up two more different time slots, and those are almost full. So here's the thing. I don't think there's like this maximum capacity for how many people we can pray for. And it may not be that we're able to pray on the exact time that you put it down for, but it will
be that day.
It will be that day, yes. But here's the thing I want people to understand. Your prayer request, every single one of them has been read already, because as I move them from email into our calendar, I have read every single one of them. And we will read them and pray for them specifically on the day that you've signed up. Okay, so that's the reason. I'm not necessarily having a commercial for our February prayer challenge, but please go to our website if you want us to do that for you. It would be an honor to pray for you. The reason why I'm saying all of that as an opening to what we're about to talk about is because in reading those emails or reading those prayer requests, I am discovering how many marriages are desperate for God to intervene and perform a miracle.
Yep.
And the thing that I think breaks my heart even more than the ones that come to us, no, they all break my heart. But where I get where I really something recently has really been tugging at my heart is when these people write in and they say, "Hey, my marriage, there's been infidelity. There's been some sort of betrayal. There's all this, we're separated. I mean, some even we're divorced." And when I read that, I think, okay, well, I mean, there's clearly somebody is crying out saying we need a miracle because I don't know what else, there's nothing else that can be done. And so God has to intervene. And there's a recognition when you're that desperate. There's a recognition of God needs to intervene. The ones that I think are even a little more painful to me because with the recognition, I think and we're going to talk about that, with the recognition of needing a miracle, then there's this desperateness, there's some action, all of that kind of stuff. There's a crying out for help, all that.
Right.
But there were so many that were just like, we don't love each other anymore, or we're just roommates. I kept hearing and reading that, and we have no connection. We have no intimacy. There's, just the gradual slip away from what married life is supposed to be. And what I think needs to happen are those people need to become desperate for their marriage in the same way. And they need to begin crying out to God for a miracle to take place.
Yeah. Yeah. And, as I've read through some of those, I know you have read all of them. But as I've read through most of them, I just keep wanting to say, guys, there's hope. Like there is hope for your marriage. And there is a God who we have seen work miracles. Like it's not something that you just read in scripture and go, yeah, he used to work miracles. He still works miracles today. And our marriage is proof of that. And then not only do we have just our story, but we work with people through coaching and counseling. So, almost on a daily basis where we're seeing miracles being worked in their marriages as well. So we know that God does this.
Yeah, and that is our story. So we have this story of a real miracle. And we're going to talk a little bit about our story and just where we each began to cry out for a miracle when Heather confessed to infidelity a little over 13 years ago. So that's our story, and it's a messy story. Like it's a story that if you just read it, hear about it, everybody I think could acknowledge and say, yeah, God had to step in and perform a miracle. And
the reason why I know that to be true is because I know there are people out there who don't believe that really happened.
Yeah.
There's some people that are like, there's no way he forgave you for that and y'all are happy.
Yeah.
Or y'all,
Yeah.
Like literally will say that to me. And I'm like, you don't believe in what God can do. Like he is more powerful than our mess was.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And I started thinking about miracles and miracles in the Bible and, in the Gospels when Jesus was performing miracles, I was thinking about, the ones that are, there's how many more miracles probably never even got, obviously did not get
got
even
recorded.
Yeah, didn't get recorded. We don't
Sure.
even know about. But in each one of those cases, I just was thinking about, okay, there were no cell phones, there was no social media, there was no transportation, but there was this guy that was walking around and was preaching and teaching to people, and word of mouth was happening. And here's what I just kept thinking to myself: people that went to Jesus for a miracle, it's not because they were like, oh, I heard there was this great man that's a really powerful teacher, and he's walking around teaching people, how to live right and how to treat people and all that. What they heard was, did you hear what Jesus did for that person? Like, he performed a miracle, and then it made them think, if I could just get in front of this guy, then he could heal me, or he could, heal my spouse or my child, or raise my child from the dead, or, release this demon from my friend, or all of these things. And it was all because they had heard a story of what he had done.
Right.
It wasn't, there was never just this, he had to have performed a miracle and somebody went, look what he just did. And then word
need
spread.
him to do that to me.
Yeah, because
For me.
it wasn't just like, oh, this guy, he's such a great teacher. There were tons of Pharisees and teachers, and it wasn't like, I bet because he's a great teacher, he could do a miracle for me. Like, they had not been seeing that. And so they had to have heard it. So all of that to say, that's what our story is for other marriages.
And one of my favorite stories in the Bible about someone seeking a miracle is the lady that basically was having a 24/7 period, like could not quit bleeding. And back in that day, you couldn't just stay around, and you were considered impure when you were on your period. Unclean, not impure, unclean. And so, like, she needed to get her life back, and she had to be, quote, unclean all the time because she just was constantly bleeding. And what I love about her story is she pushed through the crowd. She was just trying to get to him, to touch him, because she knew that if she could just get to Jesus and touch him, she believed that touching him would be healing for her. And she desperately wanted that healing. And so she's in this crowd of people. People were just following Jesus. There's people bumping into him and, up against him the whole time he's walking. And yet she reaches out and touches the hem of his garment. And he turns around and says, "Who touched me?" And people are like, "What do you mean, who touched you? There's people all around touching you. You're surrounded." And he said, "No, who touched me?" Because he felt her faith. Like, he was able to say, there is someone, y'all are pushing into me and crowding me and as I walk, but something different just touched, not me, but the hem of my garment. And he wanted to know who that was, because it was a faith of desperateness, of I need to just touch you because I need for you to work a miracle and heal me. And of course, the story goes on and he healed her, but it was her faith that he felt. It was, I know you can do it. I believe you can do it. And I'm reaching out for your help.
Yeah, that's an incredible story, because just like every other story of healing, there is a faith, and there's also a readiness and a willingness, and even to a degree, some sort of action on the part of the person that wants to be healed. Now, it is a faith, and you may be thinking, well, what kind of action am I supposed to take? And maybe that action is just there's this real faith and then this willingness of, okay, I'm going to be ready. I'm going to be willing for God. And I think that there's people out there that just aren't really ready or willing for God, and willing to do whatever it takes. Because I think these people that went to Jesus, they were like, hey, I need healing, or I need you to perform a miracle, or but if Jesus told them to do something, they were willing to do it because it was part of the process of Jesus performing the miracle. And so I know that for us, when we went to our marriage intensive, so 13 years ago, about 2 months after your confession, we went to a marriage intensive at WinShape, and we had to do separate interviews. They called us and asked us a bunch of questions, and I think the very first question that they asked each one of us were, "Are you willing for God to perform a miracle in your marriage?" And I think at the time, maybe, we sort of just kind of blew past that a little bit, and we're like, "Yeah, of course," because I do think we felt that, but I don't think we realized the importance of both of our hearts being willing and ready for God to perform a miracle. So there was this faith, but then there was this readiness and this willingness. And I think that one of the things that's so hard about healing a marriage is that when you're looking for a miracle, it's not just one heart, it's two hearts. And so when you had these instances in Scripture of these people with this faith and this readiness and willingness, it usually was just one heart. It was, okay, I'm ready. But where it gets really hard, because these people are listening to us and they're going, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm willing, but
My spouse
is not. So like, what happens when that's the case?
Right.
I mean, what do you do when it's that thing? And so I think that the goal is that both spouses get to a place where I don't know what this means. I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm willing for God to perform a miracle. All right, so just for a second, you and I, there's not different levels of how bad someone's infidelity is.
Sure. Or story, even if it's not infidelity.
Story. Pornography, betrayal of any kind,
trust,
abuse,
broken.
just anything that's going on. There's not levels where you can say, oh, my story's worse than yours. And to be real honest, I think also Satan knows exactly what is worse for you. So something that may happen to me or us may not be as bad, but if something else happens to somebody, I mean, the enemy knows exactly. And so the things that happened in our story, I think, were exactly how Satan was trying to destroy us. But at the same time, it was exactly what God was like, okay, well, I can use that to fight right back. So for those of you who don't really know our story, we're not going to get into all of it, but Heather confessed to infidelity 13 years ago, and there were pieces of that story that you would listen to and go, there's no way. Like, there's no way that you guys could come back from that and really have a marriage that you claim to have right now. And because of all of the different pieces and how messy and public and the people involved and all of that, at some point, like, you had to, even from your side of things, you had to go, okay, God, like, this is going to take a miracle. Do you remember when that happened or how that happened for you?
Yeah, I do. For me, it was even before I was broken into godly sorrow. I was still very much in the worldly sorrow of my reputation being ruined and the picture perfect family being ruined, and my dad's role in the church being ruined, all of that. I was definitely still in that. And I was at my parents' house because you had asked me to go there and you weren't there with the boys. And my mom and dad and my sister were there, and they were just crying with me. And I think I remember looking around and seeing their hurt as well, and thinking, not only have I destroyed my family, I thought at that time, but I'm hurting so many other people because of my actions. And I thought about the families that had been touched and hurt because of my infidelity, like the other people and their families. And I remember my mom and dad and my sister were all crying around me. And I just thought, God's not big enough to fix this. I mean, there's no way that we're ever going to recover from this. My marriage, my family, friendships, relationships, like everywhere I looked, I saw destruction, and I saw no way out of it. And I just remember thinking, it's going to take more than a miracle. And remember thinking, because that's before my brokenness.
Right.
And I just remember thinking, is God big enough to perform a miracle this size?
What I actually love about that is that you were not in a good place when you recognized the need for a miracle, and when you said, I'm willing and ready for a miracle. And so the part that I don't want people to miss this. You don't have to be in the right place necessarily spiritually,
Right,
or to recognize
that you need
I need
a
a miracle, and being willing for a miracle. Like, you can be in a bad place,
Yep.
And still recognize that. For me, you confessed on a Tuesday, and I think almost immediately there was this kind of surface level, because of my foundation and spiritual background, there was this surface level, okay, we need a miracle. But there was also some of this, all right, I can have enough faith to work through this and we can make it happen. But 3 days later, lots more of the story and just more pain and hurt was kind of dumped onto it. And I think at that point, I was at a place where I was like you, this is like it's going to have to be even bigger than a miracle. Like, what I know as a miracle of God, it's going to have to be bigger than that.
This is too big.
And so, but at the same time, like, okay, God, I mean, I'm willing, but this is all you.
That's right.
Like, we can't do this.
But don't you think that that's where he wanted us to get?
Absolutely.
Because if we could do it in our own strength, then it's not a miracle of his.
Yep.
If we can do it by ourselves, if I looked around and was like, okay, I got this, I'm going to help my parents, I'm going to help, then there's no need for him. But both getting to a place, and as you know, unless you're new to our podcast, we don't really script these. We don't script these before we get on. And so even, I don't know that you've ever heard me say that's the point where I felt like I knew that I needed a miracle. And so just even without planning that and hearing that we were both to a point where we knew we couldn't do it. And saying, okay, and some of you may be listening and going, okay, I'm at the place where I need a miracle, but my spouse isn't there. And so but that's the perfect place to be. You saying, I can't break them. I can't make them and force them into wanting a miracle. It's too big for me. And so quit trying. Like, you just have to beg of God.
That's right.
To break them and say, God, I need them to see the need for a miracle. I need them to realize that our marriage is in a place that needs a miracle, and be able to say, I don't know what else to do.
And I think that that's the perfect encouragement for the person that's listening, and they're going, okay, well, yeah, I am willing. I mean, I'm willing to the point where I've even sent these two strangers that I listened to their podcast, and I've sent them I've signed up for them to pray for me, and I have said, we're doomed. Like, pray for us. But my spouse is not there. I'm willing, but my spouse is not. So what do? Just what you said. You pray like crazy for your spouse and pray that they get to a point where they recognize we need a miracle, but I'm willing. I'm willing to watch God perform a miracle, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes.
Right.
Now, it's also one of those things where you got to get your eyes off of just your spouse. And my spouse isn't willing, and I'm willing, and I want to, because there is time, like that's also your time for your growth.
Right.
And for you to say, all right, God, I'm willing, but what do you want me to do? Like, where's the action that you need from me? And, I think about like even the man that Jesus performed the miracle and put the mud on his eyes so that he would, but there was he called on people to do things, to be able to say, well, I obeyed. And
did he tell him to go down and wash it off?
Yeah, but he did it like, and I might be getting different stories. I didn't look this up before, but I remember the story.
That's what we get for winging it.
Yeah, we're just winging it. Hey, somewhere in the Bible, there's something about putting some mud on the dude's eyes, and his eyes got healed and all that. But no, he did, and like I think he had to do it multiple times.
Okay.
And so, and he just kept going. He's like, "Why am I doing this?" But that's where you need to be.
Right.
If you're waiting on your spouse, pray for them. That's awesome. But in the meantime, you're asking God, okay, what do you want from me?
That's right.
Do I need to rub mud on my eyes? What am I doing?
And you're not asking God. You're asking God to break your spouse and heal your spouse and work a miracle in your spouse, but you don't sit back and wait on your spouse to do something.
That's right.
Like I hear so many people say, I've asked my spouse to do this. If he would just do this, if he would just do that, if he would just order this book, if he would just read, if he would show some initiation, like you don't have to wait on him or her to do those things. You do what God's calling you to do, and you take care of what he's asking you to do, and then leave your spouse in God's hands.
Yep.
Because you can't change them.
Yeah. So the practical steps in this, no matter where you are in looking for a miracle, here we're just fixing to spell it out. This is what you do. So if you are in a desperate situation and God needs to perform a miracle, whether you recognize it or not, maybe you're in that camp of we're just roommates. No, we don't really need a miracle. We just need to work. But no, like fight this thing and pray for this thing and have faith that God can perform a miracle, because you may not even know it, but you may need a miracle in your marriage. So you pray for your spouse, but let's turn that focus on ourselves and go, all right, God, where do I need to change? Like, what is it that I do? The personal soul searching reflection, asking God, and ask God to reveal what is it that I need to do, and what do I need to change?
And I can promise you that it will be something. Like if you're listening to this and you're thinking, yeah, I got it together.
Yeah,
it's
good.
all my spouse. You're missing it. Because God is always working on us, always refining us, always trying to make us look more like him. It is a constant battle. Like every morning and like, God, what do you want to change in me? Reveal in me, show it. What do you want to change in me to make it better? So you haven't arrived. If you think you've arrived, you're missing it.
That's good. And I think a second step in there would be to go find resources that are going to help you in the journey. And, we didn't have a lot of that back when we were desperate for a miracle. We found some along the way, but there's some great stuff out there. There's great books. There's great podcasts. There's, we have a slew of resources that we spelled out last week on our podcast, whether it's marriage coaching. And, we have more recently found how important it is for us to We love meeting with couples, and that's the goal. But we also recognize and understand that sometimes the initial step is just meeting one-on-one with people because they're the only ones that are willing to come.
That's right.
And so, if it's one-on-one with Heather, one-on-one with me, if it's obviously guy to guy,
right,
girl to girl, but that's something that we're willing to do. And, it's finding a mentor. It's finding help along the way. So seek out those resources. Marriage counseling. I mean, we went to lots of counseling. We went to a marriage intensive. There's things that will help you along your way. And then I would say that maybe the third and the last thing is just be patient, because our timing is not God's timing.
That's right.
And God's timing and plan, it's perfect for your life. And if you're seeking Him, He is going to redeem your story. Yep. And it may not be the exact way that you have in your mind planned. It might be. But
it might be better.
It's almost guaranteed it's going to be better. But just being patient and allowing God the timing to work a miracle, because sometimes it's not instant. Most of the time it's not instant. And as I was reading stories of people saying, it's been 3 years, it's been 5 years, I've been waiting on my spouse to come around, and look, here's the thing. At some point, I know the question comes, when do I give up on this?
Sure.
And there's a reality in that, because, again, it's two hearts having to work. And when one never, ever, ever comes around, then, sometimes there's other steps that have to be taken. But that's where you bring in trusted counselors, biblical counselors, people that can help coach you through those times. But just the recognition of, my time is not God's time. I'm going to be patient. I'm going to allow God the opportunity to really come in and heal and do a miracle in our marriage. Okay, so we actually squeezed it all in a good amount of time. But here's what I want you guys to hear us say. There's hope for your marriage, and miracles still happen today. And as I read over 200 prayer requests this week, my heart was just crying out desperately for miracles to happen. And if God begins to perform a miracle in your marriage, let us know, because we want to hear more and more and more stories of how God has jumped in and intervened because of your faith and because you being willing and allowing God to work a miracle in your marriage.
Yep.
You done?
I'm done.
So we can shut her down now.
So good.
Hey, thanks for allowing us to spend about 30 minutes with you, and we don't take that time lightly, and we're glad that you tuned in. So next week, we'll be back. Until then,
peace.
Peace.